Today on Locked On Rockies, we begin our series of Rockies media interviews with one of the first guests we've had on the show, Patrick Lyons. We're getting a real scoop, the real story of what's happening for the Rockies this spring, and he's going to give me the sales pitch on why you, yes, you, should care about the Colorado Rockies in 2024.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 21st day of March in the year 2024. I'm your host, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find your team every day. You can also find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show, firing off your Rockies hot takes, all the stuff that you got on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. Really appreciate you tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And let's jump right into it. Patrick Lyons back on the show. Patrick, national columnist, one of the busiest guys in the spring, because you weren't just covering the Rockies this spring. I saw you cover the You're just, do you do NL West coverage or just go wherever they tell you to go?
A little bit of everything. Yeah. And been enjoying kind of covering things other than just the Colorado Rockies, like you said, out there at Dodgers camp, which was interesting to say the least. Always news going on with the Los Angeles Dodgers each and every day, that's for sure. Going to actually be covering the Giants just a little bit, obviously from a distance here in Colorado, but it's been fun kind of branching out and getting to taste a little bit of everything. I think that's something that the Rockies as an organization as a whole probably could benefit from, kind of looking to see how others take care of business, how others go about doing various things, learning from them, comparing, contrasting, doing all that. So that's been a lot of fun.
You're doing something that Dick Monfort probably wouldn't do, which is go out the organization. And Patrick's mentioning things with the Dodgers. Just minutes before we were recording, Patrick, I just want to get your immediate reactions, because you were at Dodgers camp. You've been following this team. Give me at least just the basics. What the heck just happened with Shohei Ohtani?
Well, there's still a lot to kind of unpack and using proper verbiage, because certainly nobody wants to say the wrong thing and kind of paint the wrong picture. But it does appear from multiple sources that his interpreter, and if you recall during the offseason, he said that ultimately that's his business partner, Ippei Mizuhara, was involved in some gambling from a company that was no longer accredited. It's undergoing federal investigation as of right now. Those fines are up to $4.5 million. It does sound like Shohei paid that for his business partner there, kind of took care of that, and now there's going to be the fallout. What does that mean? How much did Party A know? How much did Party B know? What does it all mean? Will he even be, playing on Thursday morning or Wednesday night, depending on when you're watching the Seoul series? Is the commissioner going to kind of jump in on this, or are they going to try to maybe sweep it under the rug, because maybe it actually is nothing? It's so early here in the going with all of this, so it could be swept under the rug early. Hopefully it becomes nothing. At least that's, I'm sure, how the commissioner's office will probably want this to go. And maybe it truly will be nothing. But the Los Angeles Dodgers, who on paper had to hire Ippei Mizuhara, Ohtani's interpreter, have fired him. So that's pretty much all that we know as of Wednesday evening.
Yeah, and I mean, geez, it's going to probably arguably the biggest name in the sport. Gambling. I mean, there's just all the big buzzwords kind of going off there. So like you said, got to monitor it. Nothing you can really make out of it, of just other than the information now. But from big baseball news, let's go back to our beloved Colorado Rockies. And spring's been interesting. Spring's been good. I mean, I think you can easily say there's a lot of stuff to be excited about, but we're getting close to the season. And I think today's lineup here, where we're recording on Wednesday, that looks pretty much like the opening day lineup, I would say, with the exception of Kyle Freeland being the pitcher instead of Peter Lambert. What have you seen this spring? I know it's the classic question, but it's true. What do you think is the stuff that is going to translate to the regular season for the Rockies? What is the stuff that is really sticking out to you and making an impact this spring?
It just seems like everyone's been very consistent, right? Like you look at the numbers and it's almost similar to what you might expect in the regular season. Again, spring training, you got to take with a grain of salt. The Rockies actually have kind of historically in the past decade or so have had a very good winning record in spring training. And we know they lost 103 games last year. In fact, I think they had a losing record in spring training when they went back to the postseason in 2018 for the second time in 2 years. So you take that with a grain of salt, but the individual performances, I think, are the things that are promising. We'll talk about Kyle Freeland in just a second and why, it's not just this spring training aberration. It's there's something that you can actually point at and have some hope. There aren't too many camp battles that are going on. So, guys are being given spots, but they also earned it last year, and they're still continuing to play really solid. You like what Brenton Doyle's been able to do now, having a year at the majors. I've said this many times. Look, the dude had like 52 plate appearances above AA before making his major league debut last year. So a lot was made of the fact that, that the contact rate wasn't as high as you would like, low batting average, but didn't have a ton of experience above AA. So like what he's been doing early on in spring training. And like you said, I think the starting lineup is pretty much set in stone. Now, Charlie Blackmon was in right field, and you say, well, he'll be in the lineup, but he won't be in right. I actually think he will be in right. I believe he was in the outfield last year, at least one of the last 2 years, where you kind of knew he was going to be the DH, but then he started in the outfield. So I think that's a ceremonial, tip of the cap of like, yeah, you know what, just go out there and play right field. Get Chris Bryant a day over at first base. You can have Eleuteris Montero as your DH. So I think it's just been really positive altogether. And the guys after losing 100+ games last year, that can wear on a team and on a clubhouse of guys who believe in one another and know that like these guys are really good. Like we kind of forget that, you lose 100 games, you go, well, you're not very good. Maybe not against the other 29 Major League Baseball teams, but against any other group of players that aren't in the majors. Take a AAA team, and the Rockies are going to have, a 600 winning percentage against the best AAA players. So they believe in each other in that way. So I think a lot of the winning in spring training, could help maybe bleed over into the early part of the regular season of like, hey, let's prove that we're not going to be another 100-loss team in 2024. And the winning in spring training, I think, gives them that boost and gives them that confidence starting on March 28th, opening day in Arizona.
And, I think it's a great message there. And I think you've heard a lot about the vibes being different, and it feels that way for a fan. And I'm curious, have you noticed a difference in where the clubhouse mentality atmosphere at this point versus this point last year? I mean, last year, Mike Moustakas, CJ Cron, Randall Grichuk. I know Grichuk was injured at the time, but there was a lot of these vets and a lot of these guys coming. Jerks and Profar, another name there. Can you compare, where the Rockies are at just as a clubhouse? And did the Chris Bryant stuff really mean anything? I mean, we reacted. I talked about it. Of course, everyone, Chris Bryant did something. We had to talk about it. Did that shake anything up in the clubhouse?
I don't think it really did too much. I think in many ways, Bryant just kind of put his foot in his mouth. I think he might have been trying to have his cake and eat it too. If you get a really big offer from a team, you can't say no to that, right? But if it's a team that is, due to lose, for the next couple of years before getting back into contention, you just kind of have to swallow your pride a little bit and understand that's where things are. And I think, Bryant, in a lot of ways wanted to sound as if, oh, you know what, actually, I thought we were going to win, but, I kind of miscalculated. I didn't know the prospects. That's why we're kind of, we're in this mess, but it wasn't as if I was coming to Colorado purely for the paycheck, which, again, these players deserve to go and make as much money as possible. And they have the right to go ahead and do that. He's already won his World Series. So without kind of rehashing the whole argument and conversation, I just thought it was a little bit of, double speak of want to have your cake and eat it too. So maybe misspoke, poor choice in words, but I think within the clubhouse that was completely understood. I think the vibes in general are just better. This time last year, as you said, all those veterans coming in. I mean, shoot, Jerks and Profar legitimately wasn't even in San Diego for the first 2 games of the regular season. They played down a man, which to my knowledge has never happened in the history of baseball because they had no options. I mean, he's on the major league roster. He's on the 40-man. He's on the 26-man roster. He can't go down to AAA. So they literally played a man short in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal, right? Because it just meant a bench player was going to be used a little bit more. But that was kind of how strange things were last year, where they were really trying to put a Band-Aid on somewhat of a gaping wound in hopes of not losing 100 games. And again, maybe if Marquez and Senzatella don't go down to Tommy John surgery, maybe they're able to thwart that off. They probably are. Maybe they lose 98. But still, they were really trying to kind of, patch things up. And there's a lot of veterans too hanging around the clubhouse throughout the first half of the season, contributing, doing a nice job. Mike Moustakas was a great leader, great guy in the clubhouse. But then once he started getting traded, you had the entire month of July where everyone's waiting around. Like, am I going to get traded? Are you going to get traded? They're veterans. They know how to deal with those kind of things. But at the same time, that does have an impact on that clubhouse. Whereas now it seems as if everybody's kind of on that same page of like, hey, I'm trying to establish myself as a big leaguer. Maybe I'm already established. I'm going to be a part of, hopefully that next contender, the next playoff caliber team in a year or two. So I think everyone is pointed in that same direction to help each other out and try to get a little bit better so that they can avoid 100 losses for the second straight year.
Yeah, and let's talk about the stuff that's going to help them avoid those 100 losses. We're going to do that. The stuff that we are liking from the spring, and a warning sign that, it's just one that is sticking out to me. Two warning signs for two players that we'll dive into here coming up in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. But before we do that, got to tell you about the show, or the people that help make this show possible, as I completely, misfired on my ad there. But Amazon Fire TV is one of those great sponsors, and Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date with all things in the world of sports, not to mention news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, and more. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices, and you can learn more at amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. We are also brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel's got you covered for all your action this March. It's a pretty big month when it comes to basketball, and I believe there's a lot of basketball going on today. And you can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, and it doesn't have to be about college basketball. You want to bet on Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, or maybe Cale Makar and the Colorado Avalanche. You can check it out at FanDuel. $200 free bonus bets if your $5 bet wins, that you can use on point spreads, money lines, all sorts of good stuff. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Shout outs to our Buffs and Rams in the tournament as well. Rams playing, I would say, a basketball game last night. It was not a very pretty basketball game, but hey, you know what? A win's a win, and we'll take that. Patrick Lyons here, columnist here extraordinaire. Go check out some of his work. You've been writing for Just Baseball a little bit, right? One of a really great website that covers all sorts of baseball stuff. I've seen some of your work there, right, Patrick?
Absolutely. Justbaseball.com. There's tons of really good podcasts. My buddy Kevin Henry just started one up there with some interviews with some great players. Brendan Rodgers and John Gray actually just caught up with them the last couple episodes. So that's a real fun one. And podcasts, tons of articles. We got guys covering all 30 teams. So it's been a lot of fun working with them at justbaseball.com.
Well, let's jump off the Brendan Rodgers thing because I wanted to ask about stuff that you're really focused on from the spring. For me, Kyle Freeland's increased velocity, the apparent health of Chris Bryant, Brenton Doyle, you mentioned. I mean, the offense, of course. I think a lot of people forget what you mentioned about Brenton Doyle, where it was like we didn't know who this guy was. And then he just started catching everything in center field. So we're like, all right, we're just going to send him out there. He's good. So for me, that's the type of stuff I'm looking for. And some of the stuff I'm worried about, I'm worried that Montero had a stretch of five, it seemed like 5-6 games without a hit, 3 strikeouts, 2 strike. The classic Montero kind of experience we've seen where scorching hot, ice cold type of situation. I'm worried about Austin Gomber because I'm seeing a lot of hits given up and not a lot of innings pitched in spring. What are the things that you are really focused on that you've seen this spring?
It's funny. Anytime a player is struggling in the spring, you write it off as, that's just kind of spring training. And if a guy's doing really well, you temper your expectations, but you believe in it. You actually believe that is true. So, I think the health of the pitchers is probably the biggest thing that I'll be keeping an eye on going into the season. Gomber, his health is one of the, there's 4 players that I'm concerned about because of last season's, the injuries and guys just having to go out there and eat up innings, both in the rotation as well as in the bullpen. Kyle Freeland and Austin Gomber had to do it. How many starts did they have to go out there and post up 4, 5, 6 innings when it might've been, skipping a start or giving them an extra day's rest in the past when you had more pitcher depth. And then the young guys, Justin Lawrence and Jake Bird, man, those guys threw a lot of innings, a lot of stressful innings on their arms last year. So the hope is that those guys can get through, completely unscathed and without, lengthy trips to the IL or, God forbid, Tommy John surgery. Going back to Austin Gomber, what you said, he has tweaked his mechanics just a little bit, the way he's standing on the rubber. And some of that is actually to take some of the pressure off the lower back that he's had issues with in 21 and 23 that wiped out, the last several weeks of the season. So that's something that's going to, it might impact him in a stat line early on in the season, but it could allow him to be better deeper into the year and make 30 starts for the Rockies. So that's kind of one of those big pieces. It's really the health, I think is just such a huge piece. Montero, he's going to be a little bit hot and cold. If he was playing regularly, it might not stand out quite as much, right? But he's not really going to get that opportunity. Unfortunately, with Chris Bryant at first base. And then even when you have Chris Bryant, potentially going out to right field, is Bouchard or is Hunter Goodman coming up or Michael Toglia? Are those guys hot? If they are, then Bryant's going to stay at first and Montero may have to fight for some at-bats at DH. So, there's not a ton of flexibility with playing time. Again, in theory, those guys will get their at-bats, but they won't really be able to play through those kind of difficulties that you're concerned about.
Yeah, man. The Montero thing, it's the same story. He's not going to break camp. He's not breaking camp as, hey, Chris Bryant, Charlie Blackmon, you better, you're really got to watch out. It's still going to be there, man. That one's going to be a tough one to watch. But how much can we buy into Kyle Freeland? How much can we buy into, a 4 mile per hour increase in Kyle Freeland's velocity seems like to me the thing that could bring him back to previous form. And I've talked a lot and I highlighted this. Kyle Freeland has now, with this opening day start, I think cemented his Rockies legacy. You can't talk about successful Rockies pitching now throughout the annals of history without talking about Kyle Freeland. How much can I buy into him? I think he's the true leader of the rotation. I think he's the right guy to be the number 1 right now. But we also saw him really struggle last year, like you said, especially when the Rockies had to turn to him a ton.
Yeah, and how fatigued was he in those moments, right? Like, hey, we just need you to go out there. So I think he had to pitch through those things a lot. The increase in fastball velocity, I think, is going to help him out, a ton. If you know anything about baseball, that lefty pitchers, starters or relievers, they age like a fine wine. And so, Kyle Freeland here now, 30 years old, is going to be 31 in May. You go, all right, now is maybe the time where he does, turn it up a notch. If you toss out his Cy Young type season in 2018, finishing 4th in the Cy Young, as well as tossing out the next year when he got sent back down to the minors and had a 6.73 ERA over 22 starts. You toss those 2 out because maybe they are the extremes of things. Over the last 4 seasons, Kyle Freeland's average of 4.61 ERA. His career ERA is 4.39. I think in many ways this is the pitcher, that he is. I think going out there and kind of being true to that ERA, rather than having those kind of games where you go 3 innings and you give up 7 runs, and then the next time you go out and it's 6-7 innings, giving up 2 runs. I think he wants that overall consistency to give his team a chance to win. And this offense, I think, is going to score some runs. I think they showed that in bunches last year, especially if everybody those young players can take that next step forward. And I think a lot of them are going to. So I think Kyle just really wants to be his average, so to speak, rather than have those extremes. So I know that's something that Austin Gomber has, worked through, where he's gone 7, 8, 9 games in a row where he's had a sub-3 ERA and been one of the top 10 pitchers over the course of 2 months. He's done that in 21. He did that last year in 23. Then he went and goes out and he has an ERA closer to 7. So, removing those type of outings and trying to, minimize the damage, worrying about the next run rather than the one that just scored or the one that's on third base is going to be a key part of it. And Kyle Freeland, is that much more of a veteran to make sure that, he can prevent those kind of blow-ups and just dust it off. And he's done that a lot better as he's gotten older. And so the increased fastball velocity, I think, is going to help him be able to do that even better than just being a veteran pitcher and just having that experience.
Even if he cuts down the amount of home runs he gives up this year by 10, that's going to be a huge step in the right direction and exactly what the Rockies need. Cal Quantrill, Dakota Hudson, just give me your brief thoughts there. Cal Quantrill's been really interesting. I mean, had a solid spring and the stuff seemed to be getting a lot of praise. Haven't heard as much from Dakota Hudson, but also kind of still the same thing where, pretty good spring, some good numbers there. How are we feeling about these two arms filling out the Rockies rotation?
Hudson definitely looked a lot better, was a lot more effective in his start on Tuesday during that split squad game where Austin Gomber did not fare so well, wasn't able to get out of the third inning, so not really able to stretch out quite as much. But the Rockies are giving guaranteed money to Dakota Hudson. He also has another year of club control. That's another piece to this, is that while he was a free agent, he wasn't a natural free agent the way we think of a guy like a Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery or Michael Lorenzen, 2 starting pitchers who are still free agents right now as of this recording, which is crazy to think about. So it wasn't as if he had gotten 6 years of service time and became a free agent. He was ultimately designated for assignment by the Cardinals. Similar situation for Cal Quantrill. I think that was a great trade for a guy that ultimately just didn't fit for Cleveland anymore. They're kind of turning their nose up at $6.5 million for a guy who was, really solid the last couple of years. And if you look at the adjustments he was able to make in the final month of the year when he started feeling a lot better, this could be a great value pick. And Quantrill also has another year of club control. So I think Hudson, is going to have one of those 5 spots in the rotation, behind Freeland, Quantrill, Gomber. You'll see Hudson and Ryan Feltner, and kind of go from there if any of those guys need to come out of the rotation. But they're really going to get every opportunity to do that because the options behind them are somewhat limited, and also in a way they need to be preserved for the slog of the long season to make sure that if there is an injury, they still have that number 6 and number 7 guy ready to go. Once you start swapping them in and out and jostling guys in and out of the rotation between a Hudson and Feltner type, then all of a sudden that depth, gets hammered a little bit more, and it becomes harder to eat up some of those innings once you get into, June and July.
And the Rockies need to get into June or July healthy with their pitching staff because that's when they can hope. It's July, late July for Herman. That's what we're thinking.
Yeah, sometime after the All-Star break. The Rockies have done a good job of, I'm not going to say setting expectations low, but saying, yeah, this guy's done. Do you remember when Brendan Rodgers, had the shoulder injury last year? He's done for the year, right?
Right.
And he was back, for much of the second half, pretty much, it seemed like. So, we'll see him at some point in July. And then Senzatella, probably not going to see him, which is to say he might get 1 or 2 starts in September. So, that will be interesting to see when those guys come back. But when they do, they're not going to be vintage Marquez, vintage Senzatella. They're just going to be working their way back to hopefully have somewhat of a normal 2025.
Yeah, and it'll be a very big season, especially for German Marquez in 2025 as we get there. You mentioned Brendan Rodgers. I want to talk about him, but we got to take a quick break before we do that. Then I'm going to get your sales pitch. Sell me on the Rockies. People are looking for reasons to be excited about the Rockies, and there are reasons to do so. We're going to talk about that coming up in segment number 3. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including the pros and sharks. You pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in, like Nikola Jokic rebounds, Jamal Murray 3-pointers, that type of stuff. You pick more or less, and you can see the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. You can even get that injury insurance so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Download the app today, the PrizePick app today, and get the code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, LOCKEDONMLB, for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 when you download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. All lowercase, all one word, LOCKEDONMLB on the PrizePicks app. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. PrizePicks. Wrapping up here with Patrick Lyons of, all sorts of great coverage going out there. National columnist here, Patrick Lyons. And, it is, I liked what you said. Good metaphor at the beginning for going out and seeing what's new and trying something different. It got to be refreshing here, but we're almost out of time, so I don't want to distract us too much. Brendan Rodgers, what's his impact going to be? I mean, a guy that I don't really think we've heard much of anything this spring, which probably isn't a bad thing because we know what Brendan Rodgers can do. We know the level of player he is, and he's staying healthy, at least it seems. What have we heard from about Brendan Rodgers?
Yeah, Brendan is fully recovered. Obviously, was able to come back last year over the course of the final 46 games of the year. We saw him a lot there. He's been playing really strong in spring training, hitting 400 going into today. No homers, and I think that might be one of the biggest concerns right now for Brendan Rodgers is that power. Now, again, with the shoulder issue last year, and he's had that in the past, I think that sapped a lot of his power. Was able to hit 4 homers in those 46 games last year, 9 doubles, overall slugging percentage kind of down for what you typically expect. But Buddy thinks he's going to be, getting that power back because right now he's projected to be, their cleanup hitter. Buddy wants to separate all those left-handed hitters. So if you got Charlie leading off, then Nolan Jones is going to be hitting 3rd. Ryan McMahon is batting 5th. So you need somebody at 2 and 4. Chris Bryant will bat 2nd. Brendan Rodgers will bat 4 here in the early going. So Buddy seems to think that power will come back, but he's looking good. He's looking fine. I'll be really curious to see, how his defense is able to bounce back. Feeling more comfortable diving, going to his left and to his right, which is how he originally heard it at the beginning of last year. Because he was in his last full season in 2022, the Gold Glove Award winner at second base. So the defense coming back, I think, will be really important for him. But again, what he's able to do at the plate and what we saw in 2022 after that first month of the season, after he was below the Mendoza line, batting something like 0.92, whatever it was. But after that point, and through the first week or two of September, was one of the better second basemen in all of the National League. So the hope is that this year in 2024, he can really put that all back together, because after next year, Brendan Rodgers is already going to be a free agent. Still seems like we're kind of waiting for him to be Brendan Rodgers, to be that guy. And the time has kind of run out, unfortunately, because of all of those injuries. So this is going to be a very important year for him if he's going to be a guy that maybe the Rockies want to keep around as one of those veterans going forward. We know there's already Adiel Amador and Sterling Thompson at second base. Dion Jorge, maybe you project him as possibly being a second base guy down in the A level right now. But Rodgers, maybe they're able to fit him in somewhere else and lock him up to extension. But he's got to be able to prove it for the course of the full 6-month season here in 2024 for something like that to possibly happen.
Rockies do love signing their vets to extensions, though, especially the ones that have ties to the success of the past. And I know Brendan Rodgers isn't quite there, but was one of those highly touted prospects. And me personally, my big hot take, I think Brendan Rodgers is top 5 base in all of baseball potential at second base. But like you said, got to stay healthy. Last question here for you, Patrick. Sell me on the Rockies. Give me the elevator pitch. Someone's like, all right, I'm getting the Rockies package or whatever they announce for their cable streaming thing next week. Give me the elevator pitch for the Rockies.
All right. Well, 2 quick ones is Charlie Blackmon's final season, right? It's 14th year with the team. Hasn't been announced yet. I don't know that we will officially get an announcement. It might just be,
that's the last 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
Come to the last homestand and celebrate Charlie announcement for sure.
Yeah. Well, but you could also very much milk that over the course of an entire season if you wanted to. But I'm sure Charlie doesn't really want those kind of questions. So be it. So, again, the final year of Charlie Blackmon, kind of, the end of that era of the 2017, 2018 team. Sure, there's still some guys around, but he was much more one of those cornerstone pieces. Also played with Todd Helton. So that's number one. Number two is, another year of Nolan Jones and Brenton Doyle and Ezekiel Tovar. Now, Doyle and Jones were a little bit flashier, and it just seemed like each and every game they were doing something spectacular. It's why, despite the fact that they lost more games in 2023 than 2022, the second half of the year was way more exciting to cover this team because there's electricity in the ballpark when those guys were on the field. It's the similar feeling I had watching Nolan Arenado every single day. I don't think I appreciated defense enough until Nolan Arenado was there just doing it all the time. And it was like, wow, I can now really appreciate how hard this is to do because Nolan's making that play and every other third baseman in the league is not. And I think Doyle and Jones with their arms and Doyle with his range, certainly able to do that. So that's exciting. But I think probably the biggest pitch that I would have right now is for all of those Nuggets fans, and I think more Nuggets fans than Avs fans, but I think this is true for them as well. When the Nuggets were really starting to build something, and Nikola Jokic was still yet kind of undiscovered on a national basis, and it was very much that the Nuggets they've got something going here. They're going to be very good. This could be something really, really special. And then it became that thing that everyone really saw coming to fruition, and it did do that. Now, that's not to say I think that the Rockies have that core right now where they're going to win a World Series or even win the National League or even make the postseason at that matter, right? But I think now is that time. This 2024 season is that period that you can look and say, you know what? People might be buzzing a lot about the 2025 team. That's really when it seems as if they might take that step forward and start to become a contender. If you look at their payroll going into next year, they got a lot of money coming off the books. Now, again, the whole TV situation might really take a lot of money out of the coffers, but with all the free agents that are going to be available next offseason, there's a chance that they could be somewhat aggressive next year. And 2025, all of a sudden, they could be somewhat, not totally, but somewhat of a darling. And all that, in order for that to happen, begins in 2024. It begins with, Jones taking another step forward or even just being as good, even slightly worse than he was last year. I mean, even look at Julio Rodriguez, what he did from his rookie season to last year. Last year, numbers weren't as good, but he solidified himself as one of the top players in all of MLB because he was able to avoid that sophomore slump. Jones is going to have to do that too. Doyle taking a step forward. Tovar taking that step forward. Maybe really having something in a guy like Cal Quantrill and hopefully in a Dakota Hudson and getting all the debuts of the players that fans have been able to see during spring training and seeing, hey, Jordan Beck, this could be the next dude, right? Sterling Thompson, Adael Amador, maybe scratching the surface, making a late debut, similar to what Tovar was able to do in 2022. So I think this is that year to say, you know what? Get in on the ground early, because if they're going to have that kind of postseason contender in 25 and reach the postseason in 2026, to which everyone's going to be buzzing about, it has to start right now in 2024. So you can get in on the ground really early with this team and getting to know who the personalities are, getting to know the bullpen ins and outs, and really paying that investment forward by watching all of 2024.
Well, you convinced me, Patrick. I'll be watching the Rockies a bunch, and I know you will be as well. Where can people go to make sure they're following you? And what is the coolest card that you've pulled this spring?
Oh my gosh, this spring, I can't think. Well, actually, so my first pack of Topps 2024 opened it up, and it had a Nolan Arenado relic card in it. That was, I think maybe it was numbered to 200 or something, but that is like 2 days after it had dropped, right around Valentine's Day. So yeah, that was definitely, I'm not going to beat that. Like first pack of the year,
Right.
forget it. That's great. But justbaseball.com is where you can get all my written stuff, not just about the Dodgers. I am still writing about the Rockies and other things. Scott Boras, talked about how when his guys wait this long, they don't get their money. And well, we've seen that. Guys like Snell and Matt Chapman have not gotten their money. So over on justbaseball.com, over on X at Patrick D. Lyons. And I'm doing a couple of little TikTok things, having some fun at Patrick Lyons MLB. I think that's my handle. I don't know. I'm building a following there, having fun, going to Buc-ee's. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
Important stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Giving you the Rockies breakdown in a minute as well. Always having fun covering the team. Really love your coverage of the other teams as well. It's really cool to see you get to go out and do stuff. Patrick, thank you so much. We're wrapping things up for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. You can find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel where you can subscribe, be part of the show. Folks, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockies your first listen of the day. And until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.